Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sylvia and Peter talking about mental health and well-being. And we call it Food for Thought because hopefully we bring up topics that are relevant to you, that might be controversial. And, we may just say things that other people don't want to say or that you may not want to hear. But that's the whole point, to cause some debate about various topics within mental health and well-being. So the one we have picked for today is about business owners. And the question is, do they need to be told by the government, by rules and regulations, what to do about mental health and well-being in their organization? And I've had this debate with a lot of people, and I always get the pushback, well, government should tell you what to do. They already do in terms of physical health and safety. And then the other piece of pushback I get is, well, isn't it just the moral duty? Why wait? And my personal opinion is, yes, why wait? Go and do it. Be a human being. And I think if we do that in businesses, just never mind what the rules and regulations say, we have a moral obligation to keep our employees safe and well, make sure they don't get ill from going to work. That's the least we can do. And what are your thoughts on this, Sylvia?
I'm with you on that. I don't think any organisation should wait for the government to tell them what to do in terms of the mental health and well-being of their staff. Like you, I think there's so much legal framework around duty of care from an employer to an employee around health and safety. My own personal view that ergo it also includes mental health. There are some great government sort of guidelines. The one that springs to mind is the Stevenson Farmer Thriving at Work report that came out in 2017. That was commissioned by the then Prime Minister Theresa May, which gave obviously guidelines, but I think that gave weight to the importance of mental health in the workplace and to the UK, economy, government, businesses, and everything else. And I think a lot of it served a purpose to get many people to sit up and listen, but it was only guidelines. And I think there is a moral duty of all employers to look after their employees' mental health. And I don't think any employer should wait to be told by an external body, this is what you do to look after your staff. Because with your business hat on, your staff are what make things happen. Have great products and businesses and everything else, but it's your employees that make it happen. Why wait for an external body to tell you what to do? And if that organisation does, is that not a delaying tactic? Is that not an excuse then to not do something in this space? Oh, the government hasn't given me a directive. For example, we had the directive that came out just recently, Sajid Javid, with the suicide prevention. And then he moves on and it's all been forgotten about. I haven't heard anything more about it. We had a suicide prevention minister, the first time ever in the UK government a few years ago. What has happened then? And I don't think it is for organisations to rely on the government in this respect. There's enough legal framework. It's just do it. It's the right thing to do and the business thing to do. Do we need to make it legal that each employer has to look after the mental health of its employee? I don't think so, no.
I don't really think so either, but the world we live in, it's probably necessary because even the physical health and safety rules are being overlooked and not followed and just the bare minimum done, because if there are no consequences, it is probably easier to not do it, because a lot of these health and safety features and regulations and initiatives you can put in, they cost money. They may slow down efficiency or production or whatever it is. So the last thing a business owner wants is more red tape. And I just fear that this is being looked at as red tape and anti-business, where we think about business as it's numbers, but as you and I know, business is about the people in the business.
Mm.
Without them, if they don't feel right, the business is only going south. So it's a bit of a conundrum. I think it's a lot to do with money and more pressure, more rules and regulations. We've got all sorts of policies that we need to be aware of. And there is legislation, certainly in the UK, about how employers must treat their employees, both in terms of physical and psychological health. It's out there.
Mm.
But it's almost, I think, also, if the law says one thing, that's what we do. And if something goes wrong that wasn't covered by that, then it's okay. Then it's not our responsibility anymore.
Mm.
Because, yes, we followed the letter of the law. And that's a sad place to be when you only look at your employees as something that needs to be cared for in a certain prescribed way by a government body or department who can't possibly know everything about every type of business that's out there.
Mm. It's interesting because as you're talking there, and it comes back to, so why then would an organisation do something in the mental health space if it doesn't have the government directive? Because as you say, it's not like you work in banking or, or the education industry, you have an external body comes in and does an audit, your anti-money laundering, your techniques, or Ofsted come into an education facility. It's not like there's an external body will come in and check that an organisation is doing their mental health and wellbeing strategy or policies, directives in line with government policy. So, and again, this is the other thing, that so many different organisations have a different way of doing their mental health and wellbeing strategies, D&I as well. And I wonder whether it's driven more by what the competitors are doing in the industry rather than what government is telling them to do. For example, if you work in XYZ organisation and your contemporaries ABC, if A, B to C are doing that, we better do that as well. It's not coming from an external body. But to your point, there is no consequence. There's no comeback if they don't. And I just wonder whether, I suppose, as I say, it comes back to what's the motivation for an organisation to put a strategy like this in place to start with, if it's not coming from a government.
Because government rules and regulations and guidelines, it's great because then you know which direction to follow. But at the end of the day, who is going to come in and, as you said, audit all of this? So we have a psychological work environment policy and checklist and all that stuff. That's good. And we can check it internally, but do you then want to have an external auditor to come in and check to see if all the points have been followed and if everybody is happy about that? And then what authority does that external auditor actually have? Is there any, it's a very sort of woolly area, I think, which I would have hoped would be more down to the individual business owner, whether it's a big corporation or a small family business, it doesn't matter, to realize that their business is entirely dependent on the health and well-being of the employees, physical as well as psychological. It doesn't matter. But the other aspect to this is, yes, we can say, look, you have a legal requirement, you have a moral responsibility to keep your workers safe so that they don't get ill from going to work. I mean, that must be a bare minimum legally and morally. But there is also this fact that we are all human beings and we bring our life into the workplace. And I know a lot of employers are asking themselves, well, why and how can that possibly be my problem, that my employees have mental health issues or something going on in their lives that make them a little bit absent-minded or accident prone at work? How can that be my responsibility to deal with that? It's a fair question.
And what was also popping up for me while you were talking there about guidelines from the government and things like that. For example, that Thriving at Work report, there has been so many reports. There are guidelines. The wording within those guidelines and reports are, for example, we recommend, we suggest that we would like to see. It would be great if. They are not must. You have to. So they're then open to interpretation. Back up for a moment. They're up to take up to start with, then the interpretation for that. And then, but then if we do make them into law, it then becomes prescriptive, and that won't always fit or suit different organisations. But of course, then the common sense approach is, well, that's the guideline and that's the law. You then mould that to fit each individual organisation. But also, to your point, I do think there is a moral responsibility, even a legal responsibility somewhere, for an employer to look after the mental health of their employee. Although I do appreciate that, I know, for example, myself, when I struggled with my own mental health in the past, that was a very private thing, and I kept that to myself. So when I went into work, I did my job, and I did my job very well, and no one else knew what was going on for me. Now, other people will take that into work. Now, my personal view is, if that starts to affect how we are at work, then I believe an employer does have a responsibility to look after that member of staff, but also because the ripple effect of that member of staff's behaviour, responses, how they turn up, the ripple effect of that on everyone else, but also potentially on the business, the organisation, everything else. So I do think there is a responsibility. That's what I believe. And
I think that's a very good point to bring to the fore here, because the more we seek to normalise talking about mental ill health, the more people will talk about it, the less people will hide it at work. So there is a conversation to be had, and you can't go to work and publicly feel rubbish without then some sort of doing something about that person's well-being at that point in time. That doesn't mean that employers should all of a sudden become therapist centers. That's not the whole point. The point is just treating everybody as a human being who has his or her ups and downs, and that it happens at all levels of the organization. So whilst I would like to see some clear messages from governments, I also appreciate the fact, as a business owner myself, that I don't want to be dictated to in every aspect of running my business what I should and shouldn't do. But it would be great to just have some idea of what might be the minimum requirements here. But again, we are talking about mental health, which is more woolly around the edges and fluid than lifting boxes in the right way or having safety shields on machines, that sort of thing. That's very hard and fast, and everyone can understand what it should be done there. But when you're dealing with human beings, things tend to be far more difficult to have a firm handle on.
And perhaps it falls into the, dare I say, the nanny state area. Do we have to wait for everything to come from the government before we actually make a decision to do something ourselves? Surely that's the whole idea of an organisation, to take responsibility and accountability for themselves, their business, their products, and their employees. And perhaps then that then goes the other way. It feeds back to government what's required. Perhaps it falls into that. Do we really need to be told that we need to do something about suicide prevention? Do we really need to be told to do something about mental health in the workplace? I'd like to think not, but perhaps some do actually would like some outside guidance so they can feel like they are doing the right thing. Otherwise, they may be doing, I don't know, something along, this line, when actually we're on something over here. So you have a bit of a gap. To give them some sort of guidance or guidelines or things to work on to make sure that they are, dare I say, all on the same page and working towards the same thing, not pulling against what's going on.
It would be really exciting to hear what those watching this conversation have to say about this, because you and I do not have the definitive answer to this.
No.
I like to understand what are the general guidelines, but I also want to have the freedom to do the right thing by myself. what suits my business. And I know a lot of business owners out there are of the same opinion. Don't tell me what to do. I'm a big boy or girl. I know what to do. It's just, are they doing it? Are enough people doing it? So why don't we leave that thought hanging there? Should we have more rules and regulations, or should we have the freedom? And are we up to the job of having the freedom to do the right thing
great
by
point.
ourselves and by our employees?
Mm.
So thank you so much for watching, and we do love to hear your comments, and we'll be back in another video another day. Take care.
Here we go. Bye-bye.